My wife emptied my bank account while I was unconscious in the hospital. The message said, "I deserve this after everything I have done for you." I responded with a single thumbs up emoji. When I was released the next day, I did not return home. My name is Mark Davis. I am 45 years old and have spent 22 years driving a semi-truck. It's not a glamorous job, but it paid the bills and supported Emily's lifestyle, which she never truly valued. For weeks I felt a persistent tightness in my chest. I told myself it was just stress, the result of long hours and terrible roadside coffee. One day, somewhere near Omaha, the pain became unbearable, forcing me to pull over and call 911. They airlifted me to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It turned out that I was not experiencing a panic attack. My heart was failing. I remember the doctor's expression before everything went dark. She said, "We are losing him." That is not what you want to hear just before losing consciousness. 2 days later, I woke up with tubes in my arms and a stent in my heart. The nurse told me I had flatlined twice and that I was lucky. However, I did not feel fortunate when I checked my phone and saw only one message from Emily. We had been married for 15 years with no children, just a mortgage in Sioux Falls and many quiet dinners when I was home between hauls. The message included a screenshot of our joint bank account balance showing $0 with a negative sign below. She wrote, "I deserve this after everything I have done for you." The amount was $61,438.72, my emergency savings, my truck maintenance fund, and my retirement money. All the comfort vanished, but what I expected to feel was not anger. Instead, I simply felt drained, exhausted in a way that sleep could never mend. I sent her a thumbs-up emoji and nothing more. When the doctor came in, he told me to rest, avoid any stress, and not to drive for at least 6 weeks. He asked if someone would be picking me up. Tomorrow, I said yes, though I lied. That night, I called my brother Mike, who lived across town. We had not spoken in months, not because we were at odds, just living separate lives. I said, "I need a favor." "Name it," he replied without hesitation. "I need a place to crash for a few days, and I want you not to tell Emily." There was a pause. "She does not know you are alive." "Oh, she knows," I said. "She just does not realize I am not coming back home." I first met Emily at a gas station outside Cheyenne, where she had a flat tire. I was the stranger who stopped to help. Back then, she looked at me like I was some kind of hero simply for knowing how to use a jack. It is funny how things that impress people at first eventually become just expected. We ended up getting married 6 months after that. Not a reckless choice, but a swift one. I was 30. She was 27. Old enough to be cautious, but young enough to believe in something. She never liked that I disappeared 3 weeks out of every 4, but the salary was good, and she appreciated what it bought. I used to call every night from whatever state I was passing through. At first, the conversation sometimes lasted an hour. Over time, they grew shorter, dwindling to just 5 minutes of updates before fading away. Looking back over the past several years, most of our communication was through messages, which all arrived safely in Nashville. Reflecting now, there were hints she had drifted away. She stopped asking when I would return, began taking trips with friends I had never met. Yet, I trusted her because that is what marriage is supposed to be about, trust. My brother Mike offered me refuge in his guest room. He works as a construction foreman locally, has been divorced twice, and understands how deeply people can let you down. He urged me to eat something, but I wasn't hungry. My mind was consumed by thoughts of the house I had purchased and the refinancing I completed 3 months earlier when rates had fallen. Emily had said she was too busy to attend the signing, so I managed the process alone, placing the mortgage only in my name since my credit rating was stronger. She never requested to look at any of the documents. There was also the medical power of attorney I had arranged last year after my friend Tom suffered a stroke and his partner was unable to make decisions for him. Concerned, my niece Sarah, Mike's daughter, and a law student helped ensure everything was properly prepared. "Does Emily know you're here?" Mike asked as he handed me a sandwich. "No," I replied, "and we're going to keep it that way for a while." "She took everything?" he inquired. I nodded, taking a bite of the sandwich, which was completely tasteless. I planned to get some rest, doctor's advice, but that night sleep eluded me. I lay staring at the ceiling, recalling every small moment when Emily had seemed distant, secretly checking her phone. The situation with passwords constantly changing and money transferring between accounts for better interest rates had escaped my notice until recently. No longer so, because on my third day at Mike's place, I received a message from our neighbor Greg saying, "I haven't seen you around. Is everything all right? Sarah has some guy over. Thought you should know." I sat with that message for quite some time, choosing not to reply immediately, but letting it settle in. Later that day, Mike and I drove to the bank, not to our usual branch where Emily and I were recognized, but to the main office downtown. I asked to speak with a fraud specialist and showed them the text along with a screenshot. I explained that I had been hospitalized and unconscious, so the withdrawals happened without my knowledge or approval. The woman behind the desk maintained a neutral and professional expression, though I sensed some pity and maybe a hint of anger on my behalf in her gaze. She said, "Mr. Davis, we can initiate a fraud investigation, but since it is a joint account and your wife has equal access, this might be complicated." I interrupted, insisting. "I want to try anyway." She nodded and began typing. "We will need hospital records confirming your stay, especially documents showing when you were unconscious or unable to act." I replied, "Not a problem." She added, "And be aware, if this escalates to a criminal case, the police will get involved." I looked at her calmly. "I understand." On the way back to Mike's, we stopped for fuel. I remained inside the car while he filled the tank. Through the windshield, I noticed a father with 2 children purchasing ice cream at a nearby shop. Life continued as usual all around me. When Mike asked if I wanted anything, I simply shook my head. At Mark Davis's place, I made 3 phone calls. First, I contacted my dispatcher to request an extended medical leave. Then, I called the credit union, where I maintained a small business account for my freelance work. Finally, I reached out to a lawyer friend of Mike's because I needed to understand my legal position concerning the house, the accounts, and everything else. The lawyer named Blake agreed to meet with me the following day. After hanging up, I took out my laptop and logged into accounts that Emily had never known about. I reviewed the status of investments she had never inquired about, not because I had been hiding anything, but simply because she had never cared about the mundane details of our finances. While I was working through this, another text came from Emily asking, "Where are you? Your truck is not at the depot. Did they tell you I came by?" I did not answer. Then Mark messaged, "This is absurd. You cannot just vanish. We need to discuss this." I put the phone down. Mike glanced over from the kitchen and said she is reaching out. Mark asked if I was going to respond, but I closed my laptop and said, "Not yet." Later that night, I took a walk around Mark's neighborhood. The sky was clear and the stars were visible despite the city lights. For the first time since leaving the hospital, I did not feel any pain in my chest, at least not physical. During that walk, I realized I was no longer angry or even hurt. I was simply done, and with that acceptance came a sense of clarity. Emily had not only taken my money, but had also... I was granted my independence 7 days after my release. I finally returned home in the middle of the day, choosing a moment when I knew Emily would be at her office. I used my key and entered as if I had just come back from another ward. The house carried a different scent, a cologne that was unfamiliar. Empty wine bottles rested in the recycling bin, and 2 wine glasses stood inside the dishwasher. I packed some clothes, vital documents, and the small locked box from the closet where I kept my birth certificate and passport. As I left, I noticed the framed picture from our wedding day was gone from the hallway table. Later at Mike's place, I met with Mark Davis, the lawyer. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork. He said the housing situation seemed complicated while examining the refinancing documents. "Since you refinance solely under your name, including that medical clause, and considering your recent heart condition, you stand a strong chance of sole ownership." I asked about the money she took. Mark frowned. Joint accounts usually mean shared ownership. But he tapped a finger on the bank statements. The fact she emptied it while you were medically incapacitated could be viewed as financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, especially since you can prove these were mostly your earnings. I nodded. If I pursue divorce, since South Dakota follows equitable division, given the circumstances, we likely have a powerful argument for a settlement in your favor. He gathered the documents and said he would prepare some preliminary documents for now and do not reach out to her or reply to any messages. If she tries to contact you, direct everything through me. The following day, Emily appeared at Mike's house. I was alone since Mike was at work. I heard her car pull up, but did not glance out the window. The doorbell rang 3 times before she began knocking. She said, "I know you are inside, Mark. Your truck is parked down the road." Her voice was muffled behind the door. "You cannot just hide. We need to discuss this." I remained perfectly still in the living room, as if playing hide and seek like a child. Eventually, the knocking ceased. I assumed she had gone until my phone buzzed. She sent a message apologizing about the money, admitting she was angry. She said I had been distant for many months, and she suspected I was unfaithful. When she discovered the house refinancing, she panicked. "We can figure this out. Please talk to me," she pleaded. It was the first time she had ever accused me of cheating, likely her projection. I turned the phone face down without responding. The next day, Mark called with an update. Emily got in touch with me. He said she hired Patricia Wells as her lawyer. Patricia Wells is one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the state, known for demanding everything: houses, retirement funds, future income. I asked what this meant for us. He explained she is serious. Wells is already alleging that my abandonment after hospitalization counts as desertion. She portrays me as unstable, saying I vanished without any explanation and refused to communicate. I exhaled deeply and wondered what was next. Now we have to get ahead of this situation. I filed for an urgent hearing about the funds she withdrew. Judge Harmon is in charge. He strongly disapproves of exploiting medical circumstances. After hanging up, I stared at the wall for a while. Then I called my niece Sarah because I needed her help with something important. That evening, I drove past our house and saw Jana's car parked next to a black Audi that I did not recognize. I circled the block once before heading back to Mike's place. While I was in the driveway, I received a message from an unknown number saying, "This is Patricia Wells. I represent Emily Doyle. Any further surveillance of my client will be considered harassment. All communication must go through legal channels." They were watching me, I was watching them, and now no one was hiding anything. 2 weeks after the first meeting with Mark, we finally had our day in court, the urgent hearing about the withdrawn funds. Emily was there with Patricia Wells, both dressed in sharp professional attire. I wore the only tie I owned, the one I kept in my truck just in case of unexpected funerals while on the road. Judge Harmon, an elderly man with white hair and reading glasses resting at the tip of his nose, reviewed the case files with no visible emotion. Occasionally, he glanced at Emily and then at me. Finally, "Miss Wells," he said, "your client took all the money from the joint accounts while Mr. Doyle was hospitalized due to a serious heart condition. Is that correct?" "Certainly, Your Honor. My client was fully justified in accessing those joint funds. Moreover, Mr. Davis had recently refinanced their marital residence solely under his name without notifying Mrs. Davis, which we maintain was the initial act of financial deceit." The judge removed his glasses and said, "I'm not inquiring about the house at this moment, Counselor. What I want to know is the timing of the withdrawal. Was your client aware that Mr. Davis was hospitalized when she took the money?" Emily leaned forward and whispered something to Wells. Wells then cleared her throat and replied, "Yes, Your Honor, but my client was experiencing extreme emotional turmoil. Convinced her marriage was ending, she took action to safeguard herself financially." The judge replaced his glasses and remarked, "It seems improbable for Mr. Davis to end his marriage while unconscious from a heart attack." He shuffled some documents and declared, "I am ordering these funds to be frozen pending further legal proceedings. Neither party shall have access to this money until ownership is resolved in the divorce agreement." Although it was not a total victory, it prevented Emily from spending any more of the money. As we exited the courtroom, Emily attempted to come toward me, but Wells restrained her by placing a hand on her arm. Still, Emily said, "Cameron, please, you do not understand so much." I walked past her without glancing back. Outside, Blake was pleased. "This is merely the beginning. Now we commence discovery where every truth must be revealed." Approximately 1 week later, Blake summoned me to his office. When I arrived, Mark Davis handed me a folder saying, "We have something." He pushed it across the desk. Inside was a bank statement from an account I did not recognize. Emily's name was on it, and the balance was $127,340.56. I asked, "Where did this come from?" Mark replied, "Your niece discovered it. Sarah's internship at the credit union downtown gave her some insight." The account had been opened 18 months earlier, with regular deposits always just below $10,000, staying under the reporting limit, a typical sign of money being concealed. "There is more," Mark continued. The deposits match your long-haul schedule. Money goes in when you are away. I leaned back in disbelief. She had been preparing this for a year and a half. Mark shook his head and said, "I don't think she was planning to leave you, Cameron. I believe she was getting ready in case you left her." I asked, "Why would I leave her? I have been working myself to exhaustion to support us." That was when Mark slid another paper across. A credit card statement showing a hotel charge from a place in Minneapolis dated 3 months ago. I had been in Seattle that week. The reservation was under the name Greg Jensen, our neighbor who texted me about a stranger at our house. Mark's expression turned serious. "We believe Greg has been involved with Emily for quite a while. He created a false trail to make you suspicious while they were together. The betrayal was not just Emily's. It was calculated and planned. Greg acting as the concerned neighbor while secretly being with your wife, Emily emptying your accounts while you were fighting for your life." I stood there, stunned. "So, what is our next step?" Blake smiled for the first time that day and said that it was up to me. He added if he were in my position, he would make sure they both regretted ever believing they could escape with this. I spent the following month staying at Mike's place, recovering physically, while Blake worked on building our case. We had a clear plan: carefully record everything and collect proof of Emily and Greg's affair to expose the financial fraud. My niece Sarah proved indispensable in this effort. Her job at the credit union gave us access to financial trends we might have missed otherwise. There was nothing illegal, just assembling pieces already obvious to those who looked closely. She mentioned one evening that the account had someone else authorized to use it, though not as a joint owner. I guessed Greg. She confirmed and added they had begun transferring smaller sums to various accounts because they knew we were onto them. I looked out the window realizing they were liquidating assets to prepare for a quick escape. That night I called Blake urgently insisting we had to act faster. He agreed, but warned we must tread carefully because revealing our hand prematurely could lead them to vanish with everything. "So, what is our move?" Blake paused and said, "We needed leverage, something that would make them hesitate to flee." The next day I went to our property when I was certain Emily would be working. I did not enter the house, but walked along the boundary, capturing pictures on my phone. The new shed Greg had helped put up last summer stood intact along with the expensive landscaping that had appeared mysteriously while I was on a 3-week trip to California. The upgrades were funded with my own money, most likely done by Greg, which increased the value of the property that was now entirely under my name. I sent the pictures to Mark Davis with a brief note saying, "Documented." 2 days after, Emily's lawyer contacted Mark with an unexpected proposal. Emily would give back half of the withdrawn funds in return for half the ownership of the house. "They are testing us," Mark said when he called to update me, "seeing if we will settle for less." I asked, "What should we say to them?" He advised, "Nothing yet, just let them worry." At the same time, I took another step. I reached out to the HR department of my trucking company, explained my situation, and inquired about the disability insurance I had contributed to for 2 decades. The representative told me I was eligible for 60% of my salary for up to a year because of my heart condition and my doctor's limitations. I completed the paperwork that very day. This would secure an income stream that Emily would not be aware of, and which would remain outside any settlement talks. The following week, I got Tom to drive me past our house again. This time, I spotted something new, a "for sale" sign on Greg's lawn. "He is cutting and running," Tom remarked. I nodded and called Sarah an hour later, who confirmed our fears. Greg had emptied his accounts just 2 days before, withdrawing almost $90,000 in cashier's checks. I called Mark immediately, insisting that we act fast because Greg was selling his house and Emily might be planning to leave with him. Mark was shocked. Without hesitation, I decided to file for an emergency injunction. First thing the next day, it would freeze all assets and stop any property sales without the court's consent. The following morning, I woke up to a message from Emily. "We need to talk, just you and me, no lawyers." I showed it to Mike. "They're cornered," he remarked. I nodded. "That's good." I then sent the message to Blake, who responded, "Do not reply, the injunction hearing is scheduled for 2 o'clock. At 1:30, I was entering the courthouse when I noticed Emily with Greg in the parking area. They were arguing and did not see me. I quietly took out my phone and recorded their interaction from a distance, a 30-second clip, capturing their connection, something they had gone to great lengths to conceal in the legal case. Inside, Blake was waiting. I showed him the video. Perfect timing, he said. Judge Harmon is already in a bad mood today. I adjusted my tie, then said, let's not keep him waiting. Judge Harmon's chambers were much smaller than the courtroom. Only the judge, the two lawyers, Emily, and I were present. Greg was not permitted in, since he was not involved in the divorce. The video played on the judge's computer with no sound, but their gestures spoke volumes. Ms. Wells, Judge Harmon addressed her. Would you please explain why your client has sworn under oath that she does not have any connections with this neighbor when this video clearly proves otherwise? Emily appeared unsettled. Your Honor, the nature of their connection is unrelated to the financial issues at stake. It is relevant when financial deception is involved. The judge then turned to Emily. Mrs. Davis, are you planning to leave the state with Mr. Jensen? Emily's expression turned pale. I don't, she stammered. The judge quickly corrected himself. Let me clarify. The court has evidence indicating that you and Mr. Jensen have been transferring large sums of money, that Mr. Jensen is selling his property, and that you withdrew funds from your joint accounts while your husband was incapacitated. This points to a pattern of deceit and an intention to abscond. He glanced at both attorneys and announced, I am ordering an immediate freeze on all assets belonging to both Emily Davis and Greg Jensen. Neither of you may leave the county without permission from the court. Then, addressing me, he added, given Mr. Davis's medical state and the proof of financial abuse during his incapacity, I am granting Mr. Davis exclusive temporary use of the marital home. Emily gave a small, choked noise. Your Honor, Wells began, but the judge raised a hand stopping him. Exploiting a medically vulnerable spouse is something this court treats with utmost severity, Counselor. You are fortunate I am not recommending criminal charges at this moment. Blake gathered his documents, trying to hide his satisfaction as we exited. For the first time, I caught Emily's fearful glance, not directed at me, but at the consequences. 3 months after the hospital, I returned to what is now my house. The divorce was finalized sooner than anyone anticipated, since Emily did not resist after the injunction hearing. Greg had vanished, leaving her to confront everything on her own. In the end, the judge granted me the house, my truck, and 80% of our savings. Emily received her car and the remaining 20%. The hidden account was divided equally, but only after she covered my legal expenses from her portion. I never communicated with her directly again. Everything was handled through attorneys. The last news I had was that she relocated to Minneapolis, presumably to start fresh. About 6 months later, I sold the house Too Many Memories. I purchased a smaller home nearer to Mike and Sarah. I used some of the funds to assist Sarah with law school. She is destined to become an outstanding lawyer. I no longer drive long distances. My heart cannot endure the pressure. The doctor recommended I find work in dispatching instead. Now I return home every evening. It is quieter than the open road, but there is something valuable in stability. Occasionally people ask if I am still upset about what occurred. The answer is no, not anymore. You cannot control others' actions, only how you react to them. Emily believed she was taking everything from me that day at the hospital, but in reality she pushed me to stand up for myself like never before. Just last week, while sorting through some old boxes, I came across our wedding album. At first I considered discarding it, but ultimately placed it back in the box. It is a part of my journey now, not the conclusion, just a chapter. The heart attack nearly ended my life. The betrayal almost shattered me, but I remain here changed, possibly stronger, and certainly wiser. Some lessons must be learned the hard way. Some people leave for valid reasons, and sometimes the life you reconstruct surpasses what you lost.